Okay, here's a question you might have wondered about. Is there really a specific Japanese gene, something that defines a unique genetic identity?
It's a fascinating question and one that comes up a lot when we talk about human populations.
Absolutely. Well, welcome everyone to the deep dive. We're here to give you that shortcut to being well informed.
That's right. We take the source materials, you give us research papers, articles, all that dense stuff.
And we pull out the key insights. We want to give you a clear understanding, fast.
Today, we're diving into the genetics of the Japanese population. What does the science actually say about where people came from, unique traits?
And how that ancient history still echoes today. It's really quite surprising. And spoiler alert, it's not about one single magic ingredient. It's much more like a recipe, a complex genetic tapestry. We're going to unpack that together.
Exactly. And we'll look at it from different angles, based on the latest research. We want you to think critically, move past maybe some common assumptions.
Right. It's not just what the genes are, but why it matters. How does this connect to the bigger human story, maybe even our daily lives?
Precisely.
So let's tackle that first idea head on. Do researchers ever, point to one gene and say, aha, that's the Japanese gene? Is there such a thing?
Yeah, that's a common misconception. And the short answer is, well, no, not really.
Oh, okay.
There isn't one single gene that defines the entire population. What makes the genetic landscape unique is the mix.
The mix.
Yeah, the specific combination of different ancestral layers that built up over thousands of years. Plus, there are a few genetic variants, specific versions of genes that are found at, let's say, notably high frequencies.
And these frequencies were shaped by things like migration, adapting to diet, climate.
Exactly. Migration, diet, climate, maybe even cultural factors.
Right.
It's all woven together. So it's definitely more like a recipe or maybe a mosaic than one single magic ingredient.
That makes sense. Thinking about it as a mix, a mosaic. How does that change how we should think about, any human population's genetics?
It's a really important shift. It moves us away from older, sort of outdated ideas of populations being these isolated, uniform groups.
Right, like everyone in one place is genetically identical.
Which just isn't true. Human diversity is dynamic, it's layered. Every population is a product of its history. Who migrated where, what environments they adapted to, even just random chance, genetic drift.
So for Japan, the uniqueness comes from that specific history, reflected in the frequencies of certain gene variants.
Precisely. We look for patterns in those frequencies, not just the presence or absence of one single gene. It tells a much richer story.
Speaking of that story, let's get into the origins. For a long time, the standard explanation was the dual structure model, right?
Yes, that was the dominant model for decades.
It basically said you had the ancient Jomon hunter-gatherers, the original inhabitants,
Living there for millennia.
and then around maybe 300 BC or so, the Yayoi people arrived from the Asian continent, bringing rice farming.
Correct. And the idea was that modern Japanese people are largely a blend of those two groups, the indigenous Jomon and the incoming Yayoi farmers.
But you mentioned things have changed, that recent science has updated this picture.
Oh, absolutely. Recent work with ancient DNA has really shaken things up. It hasn't just tweaked the dual model, it's suggesting a more complex picture.
Okay.
Scientists are now talking much more about a tripartite model, 3 parts, not just 2.
Tripartite, so a third group involved.
Exactly. They managed to sequence whole genomes from individuals who lived during the Kofun period. That's the era after the Yayoi, roughly 3rd to 7th century AD.
Ah, okay. And what did that Kofun DNA show?
It revealed evidence of a third major wave of ancestry flowing into Japan, genetically distinct from both the earlier Jomon and the Yayoi.
Wow. So Jomon first, then Yayoi, and then another significant group during the Kofun period.
That's what the data strongly suggests. This Kofun-era ancestry seems to have come from somewhere else in East Asia, maybe different from the main Yayoi source.
So all three, Jomon, Yayoi, and Kofun, contribute to the modern Japanese gene pool.
Yes, and you can still see the signatures of all 3 layers in people today. It also helps explain some of the regional genetic variation you see across Japan. Some areas might have a bit more Jomon ancestry, others more Yayoi or Kofun influence.
That makes sense. And does this ancient ancestry connect to anything like physical traits today?
It seems so. Some research is starting to link genetic segments inherited from the Jomon, for example, to things like body mass index, BMI, and maybe even certain metabolic traits. It's like ancient adaptations are still subtly influencing health.
Incredible. So this really fuels a debate, doesn't it? Was Japan formed by 2 main ancestries or 3?
It certainly does. The tripartite view, based on this newer ancient DNA, is gaining a lot of ground, but you'll still see the dual model discussed, especially in older sources.
So for you listening, what do you think? Does this Kofun pulse deserve like equal billing as a foundational layer? Or is it more of a fine-tuning of the older Jōmon Yayoi story? It's something to chew on.
It is, and the ancient DNA evidence for that Kofun layer is pretty compelling. It just shows how science keeps refining our understanding of the past.
Definitely. Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about some of those specific genetic ingredients. We mentioned those variants with noticeable effects. One famous one is nicknamed the thick hair shovel teeth gene. What's the science behind that?
Right, that's referring to a variant in the EDAR gene. The specific variant is called V370A, or technically RS3827760.
EDAR V370A, and what does it do?
EDAR plays a role in how tissues like skin, hair follicles, sweat glands, and teeth develop in the embryo. This particular variant, V370A, seems to boost the gene's activity.
That leads to
Several observable traits, things like thicker individual hair shafts, which often results in straighter hair overall, also an increased number of eccrine sweat glands, which are important for cooling.
Ah, okay, and the teeth part.
Yes, and the classic shovel-shaped incisors, where the back of the front teeth has a sort of scooped-out shape, that's strongly associated with this variant too.
Fascinating. And you said this variant is common in Japan.
Very common. The specific allele, the C-allele linked to these traits, is found in about 78.6% of Japanese samples studied.
Wow, nearly 80%. That's a huge number for a single variant affecting these kinds of traits.
It is a big number, and its high frequency strongly suggests it was favored by natural selection at some point in the past.
Why, though? Why would thicker hair or shovel teeth be an advantage?
That's the big debate. Was it adaptation to climate? Maybe the sweat gland connection helped with temperature regulation, or perhaps something about hair texture was advantageous in certain environments.
Or maybe diet-related.
That's been proposed, though the link is maybe less clear. Some even suggest sexual selection, like maybe these traits were just considered attractive for a long period.
Or could just be random chance, genetic drift.
That's also a possibility. Maybe it just happened to increase in frequency by chance in ancestral populations, especially if they went through bottlenecks or migrations. It's a puzzle researchers are still actively working on.
It really highlights how complex evolution is. Okay, from traits we can see, let's move to one many people feel, especially here, the Asian flush.
Ah, yes, the ALDH2 variant, RS671, often called ALDH22. This one's very well studied.
How does it work? What causes the flushing?
It's all about alcohol metabolism. When you drink alcohol, your body first converts it to a substance called acetaldehyde. This stuff is pretty toxic.
Okay.
Normally, an enzyme called ALDH2 quickly breaks down acetaldehyde into harmless acetate, but the specific variant, ALDH22, makes that enzyme much, much less effective.
The acetaldehyde hangs around longer.
Exactly. It builds up quickly after drinking even small amounts of alcohol. And that buildup causes the facial flushing, sometimes nausea, dizziness, rapid heartbeat. Basically, you get a bigger, faster hit of the toxic stuff.
And this is common in Japan and East Asia, right?
Very common. Estimates suggest 30 to 50% of people in East Asian populations carry this variant. Compare that to Europeans, where it's less than 5%.
Wow, huge difference.
Yeah.
Japan fits right into that East Asian pattern then.
Yeah, absolutely, which is why the flush is such a well-known phenomenon there. It's not just anecdote, it's physiology.
So, connecting this to the bigger picture, why does this variant matter so much?
Well, it has a couple of key implications. On one hand, it might be protective against heavy drinking.
Because the reaction is unpleasant.
Right. If you feel sick quickly, you're less likely to overindulge. It's immediate negative feedback.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But is there a downside besides the discomfort?
Yes, and this is important for health. If people with this variant do drink heavily, that prolonged exposure to higher levels of acetaldehyde significantly increases their risk for certain cancers.
Which cancers?
Particularly cancers of the upper digestive tract, like esophageal cancer and some head and neck cancers. It's a serious risk factor.
So it's kind of a double-edged sword.
It really is, and the scale of research confirms its impact. It consistently shows up in huge genetic studies in Japan as the single biggest genetic factor influencing how much alcohol people consume. One study alone looked at over 175,000 Japanese individuals.
175,000. That's enormous. What can you learn from a study that big about just one gene variant?
It gives you incredible statistical power. You can confidently link the variant not just to flushing, but to actual drinking behavior, and quantify the associated health risks with high precision. You can start separating genetic effects from environmental ones. It really solidifies the connection.
Okay, so here's a question for you listening. How do you see this ALDH2 variant? Is it more protective because it discourages drinking, or more risky because of those potential health consequences if someone does drink? It's quite the dilemma.
It is, both personally and from a public health perspective.
Definitely. Right, let's unpack one more star variant. This one's maybe a bit more quirky, the earwax gene.
Yes, the ABCC11 gene, specifically the variant RS1CY22931. It sounds a bit funny, but it's actually a fantastic illustration of genetics impacting everyday life.
Okay, so what does it do? Beyond earwax.
Well, the gene influences the type of earwax you have. One version, the A allele, leads to dry, flaky earwax if you have two copies, the AA genotype. The G allele leads to wet, sticky earwax.
Dry versus wet earwax.
Yeah.
But you said there's more.
Yes. Here's the twist. The same gene variant, the AA genotype that causes dry earwax, also significantly reduces the production of odor-causing compounds in your underarm sweat glands, the apocrine glands.
Wait, really? So dry earwax means less body odor?
Generally, yes. The two traits are genetically linked through this one gene. It's quite neat.
And this dry earwax low odor variant is common in East Asia.
Extremely common. And interestingly, within Japan, its frequency varies by region. Studies mapping it across the country found it's more common in areas associated with the Yayoi migration routes.
Ah, linking back to the origins.
Exactly. And it's less common in places like Okinawa, which has a somewhat distinct genetic history.
And the everyday impact you mentioned.
Well, think about it. If a large portion of the population naturally produces less body odor,
You probably don't need as much deodorant.
precisely. Japan's deodorant market is noticeably smaller compared to, say, Europe or North America, and this gene variant is a big biological reason why. Genetics influencing consumer markets.
So wild. Okay, so why did this variant become so common in East Asia? What's the explanation?
Another great question with ongoing debate. Is it a climate adaptation story? Maybe less body odor or different sweat properties were somehow advantageous in colder East Asian climates millennia ago?
Maybe. Or could it be cultural? Did different social norms around odor develop?
That's another possibility. Perhaps the genetic predisposition influenced cultural norms, or vice versa, in a feedback loop. Or again, maybe it was just genetic drift chance events in population history that made this variant common in the ancestors of East Asians.
So adaptation, culture, or just random luck stamped onto the map?
Those are the main contenders. So for you listening,
Look at
you
your-
got the best guess. Make your case.
It's fun to think about. Okay, we've covered a lot. The origins, specific genes for hair, teeth, alcohol flush, even earwax and body odor. Let's try to pull it all together. What does it all mean? What makes Japan's genetic landscape, well, distinctive?
Right, the so what. I think the core answer is that Japan's genetic uniqueness isn't about one thing, but about the convergence of several factors.
Okay, like what?
First, that unique migration history. We discussed the blend of Jōmon Yayoi and that third Kofun layer. That specific sequence and combination is distinct.
The recipe idea again.
Exactly. Second, it's the high frequency of certain impactful variants like EDAR, LDH2, ABCC11. These didn't just pop up randomly. Their prevalence suggests selection or strong drift acting within that specific population history.
And third?
The island geography. Being an archipelago allowed for periods of relative isolation, which helped preserve some of the ancient genetic structures and allowed distinct regional patterns to persist. It limited continuous large-scale mixing from the continent after those initial waves.
So history, specific gene variants, and geography all interacting.
Precisely. And the outcome is this unique genetic profile that influences visible traits people feel, like the alcohol response, and even subtle health predispositions related to metabolism or BMI that researchers are still uncovering.
All stemming from these genetic pushes and pulls over immense timescales.
Yes, it's a living record of evolution and history written in DNA.
What an incredible journey. We went from questioning the idea of a single Japanese gene to exploring that complex three-part origin story, and then dove into specific examples like EDAR, ALDH2, and the surprising ABCC11 gene.
It really shows how much we can learn from genetics.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Japan's fascinating genetic landscape. We really hope it's given you a useful shortcut to understanding this complex topic.
Hopefully a new perspective, too.
Definitely. Now, before we wrap up, let's leave you with a few things to think about building on our chat.
Okay.
First, that origin story. Having heard the evidence for the tripartite model, where do you land now? Still team dual, or are you leaning towards team tripartite? Why?
Makes you think.
And the ALDH2 flush gene. If you or people you know experience it, do you tend to see it more as a built-in break on drinking, or is it mostly just a social inconvenience, maybe even a health worry?
Yeah, how does that play out in real life?
And finally, ABCC11, the earwax and body odor gene. What's your gut feeling on why it's so common in East Asia? Climate adaptation, cultural factors, or just the luck of the genetic draw through drift?
What's the most compelling story to you?
Lots to mull over. Keep exploring, keep asking questions. There's always more to discover. Thanks for tuning in to The Deep Dive.
See you next time.